The wait is over, and I don't just mean how long I've had to queue at the bar and how long I'm anticipating queuing at the bar for the rest of this tournament. This is the Beermat official World Cup podcast. Match day number 1 of 25. We're getting ready for game number 1 of 64. It's going to be a hell of a month, and we've waited a long time for this. 1,432 days, 205 weeks, 35,000 hours, and somewhere in the region of 123 million seconds since a ball was last kicked, give or take maybe a couple in the World Cup. And it may not be as simple as 1, 2, 3. See what I did there with the number? That's quite clever. For any team to get there, and more specifically before anything's gone on, we already have on the back of our preview podcast the other day the idea that Spain have sacked their manager with, talk about time being pressing, 24 hours before the tournament actually starts. And a lot of this is also based heavily on the fact of the president, specifically Luis Rubiales, who basically was just like, no, you can't let us know that you're going to Real. We can't find out that you're going to Real Madrid 5 minutes before the press is notified. And basically there's a lot that could happen in terms of, and it's actually going to become one of the biggest what ifs, supposing this goes a very different way, and there are numerous ways it could have gone. As it is though, Lopetegui's out, Hierro's in, and in football a crisis is only ever 90 minutes away. This is actually quite special in actually managing to get it done before a ball has been kicked. But I just want to cast people's minds back to 2010, when after the first game, and obviously the big cliche in the World Cup is don't lose your first game. Ideally you don't want to lose at all. But they went down 1-0 to Switzerland, and everyone was going a bit crazy and over the top, and it sort of actually kicked off the run of what I actually really enjoyed the World Cup. Not many people did in South Africa, but still, hear me out. Hierro was there, he was sort of in the background and calling for calm heads, and then in the end they got them through to their first ever World Cup win. Now, they don't actually have the precariousness of actually being a game behind in this sense, and it has sort of, yes, messed up preparation, but I suppose we're going to find out when they play Portugal how all that's going to affect the squad and go down. I look forward to writing an article about what might have happened if he'd been in charge, with some wacky zaniness, some bold predictions. I suspect England may win that one as well. Moving on to the actual game in question, the opening ceremony is about to kick off, and Robbie Williams is about to do his Robbie Williams thing. It's probably no coincidence that you might be able to hear Wonderwall in the background in the particular drinking establishment that I am getting very well prepared. To talk about preparation for the World Cup, this is some adult beverage type preparation, and quite fortunately for most people actually, Robbie Williams performing, hopefully we could get back to a time when he was relevant and when England were more relevant on the international stage, so hopefully those two things will mesh. The game itself, a lot has been said about how it's not the most exciting, and yes, you can very well easily get on the negative backfire on this, but me personally, it's a World Cup. Everyone's well up for this now. If you're not well up for the World Cup, then there's no way you're listening to a World Cup podcast on day 1, so I'm fairly sure everyone hearing this is well in. As far as the respective teams go, Russia and Saudi Arabia, I'll start with the hosts first. No host nation has ever lost the opening fixture, which I think actually could very well be broken today. And they're going into this, in the last 5 games they've got creditable draws against Spain and Turkey, but they've also lost against Brazil, France and Austria. They've had 1 win in their last 6 competitive games, because obviously they didn't qualify, but in the group stages in the Euros they were garbage, and in the Confederations Cup they only managed to beat New Zealand. As far as the squads go, there's a lot of players that aren't actually able to lift the team, as it was. A couple of injuries going on there, to the point where Inašević might actually become the oldest player to represent Russia if he plays today, which is looking likely, surpassing Lev Yashin's records of the oldest player to represent Russia by a good 2 years. Having a 38-year-old at the back in a World Cup, this could be a bit precarious. Then again, they're not exactly playing the most high-profile, high-attacking side you've ever seen in your life in Saudi Arabia. They are actually, and they probably will surprise a few people, but good wins against Algeria and Greece in their last 5. Creditable losses, if such a thing exists, against Italy and Germany. Peru actually in the middle of that beat them comfortably, and might be a sort of indication as to how they might surprise a few people as well. Saudi Arabia.
His suit was like the Russia sort of 2018 pattern, and to come at me with some sort of red leopard print, how very dare you? That's disgraceful. Getting back to what was Russia 5, Saudi Arabia 0. First thing I was going to do is I was going to look at, see what opening games were this high scoring. I got to France 4, Mexico 1 in 1930, and then Italy 7, USA 1 in 1934. I gave up on that. In the modern era, this is a bullshit. Before this game kicked off, I was very much of the idea like Saudi Arabia could pull up an upset, Saudi Arabia could possibly win. I mentioned the idea that no host sides had ever lost the game, and it could be there. And it's really fascinating to me, to having watched the game, think that this finished 5-0, and it hinges on, like, as most football games do, one or two different moments. We'll get to the second half and when it got over the top in a second. Everyone had this idea of how the game was going to start. I think one of the things that we massively underestimated, collectively this is, and again I could be patronising both nations here, but hear me out, is the idea that both of these sides, regardless of quality, are both passionate, absolute, I don't know, we're going to win nations. Whether they are set up for failure or otherwise, Saudi Arabia based on their qualification process and Russia based on just being Russia are the idea of like, we think we can win, and the idea of this game being a bullshit because neither side has the necessarily footballing quality, as it were. It became fascinating in the first 20 minutes or so because they weren't going at it from a point that like Spain or Italy, or it wasn't a cautious start. It was one of them starts whereby, yes, both teams are flawed, but both teams could actually do some damage and both teams could make it, and that actually, I think that helped it. And then obviously you get the first goal quite early, and what I found happen was this idea of like, very early on after the first goal, this could easily have been a massacre, and funny enough it turned out to be that way. But within the first 20 minutes you were like, oh shit, Russia can run these over. As much as I tried to hype up the idea of Saudi Arabia getting a good result here, winning it even, within 20 you were like, oh shit, this could be joke and an absolute run over of a game. And what ended up happening was that a football game broke out within both side spheres. An actual football game broke out, and then within half an hour what you ended up with was, yes, Russia were 1-0 up, but Saudi Arabia they had most of the possession, the passes, this, that, what you'd expect from a side that you think going into it are quote-unquote superior. And I would say this as a sort of copy block throughout the whole game. Russia take all their moments. Are they that much better? No. But every single moment Russia can take advantage, they take advantage. The goal before half-time is the goal that kills the game. Because, as I said, just before that, it was very much a passing game. It was I think it was like something like 70% possession, maybe even slightly less, just prior to the 40th minute. And I think the problem you've got is that when you've got two not necessarily great sides playing against each other, which this was, it comes down genuinely to concentration, and concentration was all on the Russian side. And to concede that goal before half-time, not only does it kill the game, and then the second half is an absolute procedure of, I mean, I know they can get back in it, but it's fascinating because they don't, for as much as I'm trying to big Saudi Arabia from, as much as I'm trying to say that they actually played not that badly, they didn't test the goalie once. There was a brief, and I mean very brief period, about the half-hour mark, where they had a free kick, another chance, and I think this is at 1-0, so yeah, okay, could have turned. And in the second half, I mean, wow, the fourth goal, when your man just comes on and scores, that's just lunacy. You can't allow that. As a football team, it doesn't matter whether you're practiced, not practiced, this, that or the other. The fifth goal, which is hilarious, because in my notes I literally have written down "fuck's sake" in capital letters, because the moment that free kick was lined up, I turned to whomever I was with, quite possibly the only mystery that there was in this game, and said, this is going to be in the top corner. And sure enough, they banged it in. And honestly, it's so fascinating in the idea that, like, Saudi Arabia could have done something against Russia. I don't think Russia are great. And you've got both these sides have to play better sides coming up. Uruguay and Egypt lie in wait for both of them. And the game tomorrow is going to be hugely interesting to see what happens, and whoever wins in that game will automatically be through, I would say. But what I would say is that the momentum a side has gained by that, and by that emphatic victory, this isn't a win that carries you through the group, this is a win that carries you through the tournament. And Cheryshev, he's got the 2 goals. The finish is absolutely fantastic, and we've gone from a position whereby I don't know if Russia could have done something in this World Cup to, oh, hang on, maybe on one side of the draw they'll do some damage. At the end of the day, the host nation is dangerous when they get that sort of momentum going, and Russia have done this in one game. There is no doubt from here on in they're going to be full throttle, and you cannot rate a specific home nation. You can say, oh, the quality of their players aren't as good as you would necessarily say, but look at South Korea. I would even argue to a lesser degree, look at South Africa. This can happen. It can't happen all the way necessarily, but it can happen. And the fact of the matter is that, like, we were expecting a damp squib of an opening game. We were expecting maybe 0-0, 1-0, either way. We got 5-0. This World Cup is going to defy expectations. Do you know what isn't going to defy expectations? The Beermat World Cup Podcast. Thank you for listening. We're going to get you tomorrow. We've got 3 games. This is the glory you've got after 1. Imagine what happens after you get 3 in a row. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.